Hello students, welcome back to Economics Simplified with Favor, as in aka God's Favor, where we break down complex economic topics into simple, relatable examples. If you're new here, thank you for joining and welcome. If you're a returning student, hey, glad to have you back. So for this video, I'm continuing the series on Introduction to Microeconomics, as in MICRO, for individual, economic agents, firms, household, and the likes. And I'm using the textbook by Gregory Mankiw, the 9th or the 10th edition on Principles of Microeconomics. I'm sure that you're enjoying this educational content that I'm putting out, and I receive your thank you messages, so don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to keep these videos going, and so that it reaches people who find it very useful. So today we're going to be covering chapter 19, which is on earnings and discrimination. Of course, we live in a world where nothing is really fair, even our fingers are not equal, right? As we know, there are obvious differences in earnings for different people across the world. And today we're going to be learning why these differences, what causes the difference in earnings, the difference in wages and the salaries. And this whole concept is what is known as differential earnings. So this differential earnings simply means when people earn differently, not because of reasons related to money, but because of reasons that are not related to money, right? So we call these non-monetary characteristics. So this could be due to physical attributes, it could be due to other differences and characteristics of people, which we're going to be learning about today. One instance is risk and safety. So depending on the nature of the job, if a job is more risky, then there is likely to be a higher salary attached to that. So for instance, pilots take a lot of risk going on the air, so they most likely would earn better than a sailor that's going on the sea, or even an Uber driver that's going on the road, which is relatively safer than flying in the air. Another example is construction workers. So, for instance, people who fix electricity poles or even deal with rooftops would most likely earn more than people that are doing safer construction work like plumbing or painting. And how about difficulty or convenience? A good example is time. So those who work night shift are likely to earn more wages per hour as opposed to those who work during the day, because it's more stressful to work at night. You know, you're being awake when people should be sleeping, which affects your body in a bad way and could affect your health. So therefore, because of the inconvenience of the shifts, you have inconvenience or more difficult jobs paying workers more than safer jobs or more convenient, easier jobs. For instance, obviously a CEO would earn more than an admin worker, because a CEO does more brain work and is more stressed with coordinating everybody than just an administrative worker. In the same way that an administrative worker would earn more than a cleaner, because again, an administrative worker is doing more mental work and being more productive in terms of output than the cleaner. How about a trucker who deals with waste produce? You have one that disposes regular waste versus another one that disposes hazardous or dangerous waste materials. Who do you think would earn more? Obviously, the trucker who disposes hazardous waste would earn more. So again, convenience, safety, time, all of that. And one major assumption again is that it has to be a competitive market for people to compete and earn different wages and salary based on their different productivity levels or non-monetary characteristics. There are other reasons why people earn differently. There's something we call the human capital theory, and this refers to things like education, on-the-job training, and basically your skills, right? So human capital theory refers to your mental skills that you gain from education or on-the-job training when you attend conferences and acquire skills from learning a trade or having many years of experience, right? So that falls under the human capital theory. And as we see in our everyday life, those people with more education tend to earn more than those with less education. And usually, who bears the cost of education? It's the labor suppliers, as in we, the household, we, the individuals, bear the cost of education. How about who bears the cost of on-the-job training? So for a company to invest in a worker, they need to see potential that, oh, if we invest in this worker, then he's going to be more productive and make more money for the company. So in that case, the firms or the businesses, which is your labor demanders, would be the one to bear the cost of on-the-job training. So as I mentioned, somebody with just a high school degree or less than a high school degree would probably only earn about $700 on a weekly basis in the US as at 2022, versus someone who has a BSc degree that would earn probably like $900 or $1,000 on a weekly basis. And compared to someone who has a graduate level of education, let's say a master's degree, the person could earn as much as $1,200, $1,300 on a weekly basis, depending on the job. And Someone with as high as a PhD degree could earn as much as $1,500 on a weekly basis. Again, all of this depends on the nature of the job. So how about a university graduate who has a 3.7 CGPA versus one that has a 2.4 CGPA? So even though they are both university graduates, one has a higher CGPA than the other, right? Who would you employ if you were an employer, a business owner? You would probably want to invest in a safer option, which is to go for the person with higher qualification, in this case, the 3.7 GPA. And how about gender? So gender is another non-monetary characteristic that is used to differentiate the earnings among people. So for instance, males are likely to earn more than females. And that is due to different reasons. Although we have gender equality revolution that has bridged the gap between males and females, but on average, the male typically earns more than the female, except the female is more qualified. So all other things being equal, ceteris paribus, assuming that a male and a female are both equally qualified in education and other regards, a company would prefer to invest in a male as opposed to a female. And a very common reason for that is because females often have to take time off work for maternity leave to get pregnant and to give birth to children and to raise the children in the family household. So because of that, the safer option for most businesses, assuming a male and a female are both qualified, is to just invest in the male as opposed to the female. So because of that, the males will typically earn more than the females across different occupations. So again, these vary for different jobs. So in the nursing profession, it's more common to see female nurses as opposed to male nurses. So that tells you that the females will probably earn higher than the male nurses in the nursing industry. Also, when you talk about administrative assistants or receptionists, it's more common to see a female as a desk officer because that would be the first contact in entering the company. So they would rather have a female there. So therefore, the female would likely to earn more than a male receptionist or admin officer. But again, for other jobs, especially if a job is more hands-on, like being a construction worker, you are likely to see more males than females, and therefore the males would earn more, even in the engineering fields, right? So again, this gap is being bridged over time. How about technological changes? So when technology improves, then that is another reason for different earnings. So somebody who is more technologically inclined, especially in the tech industry or in a job that requires technological knowledge, a person that has more technological skill would be preferred and earn more than somebody that is less technologically advanced. So again, back to the AI example, somebody who is tech savvy, knows how to use AI for coding and to develop, let's say, designs, would most likely earn more than somebody who is not as tech savvy, who doesn't even know how to operate a computer, for instance. And how about chance or luck? So sometimes you don't even have to do much. You might just be lucky to just earn more. And this is based on different things such as unpredicted trends. So for instance, look at how COVID brought about a shift from physical jobs to remote jobs, like virtual jobs, right? So in that way, people who were able to develop online platforms like Zoom, Teams, and the likes were able to earn more than people who were coordinating physical meetings. Another reason for wage differentials is age. So, depending on the industry, a younger worker might have an advantage to earn more than an older worker. But most times, an older worker, especially one that's not too old, like someone in their 30s or 40s, would most likely earn more than someone in their 20s. And why is that? That is because an older worker has more years of experience and exposure on the job than a younger worker. Another way that chance or luck could lead to differential earnings is when you talk about looks. So for instance, in some professions, looks are way more important to get you a better position and a higher pay. So in the entertainment industry, like when you talk about actors, musicians, what we call the superstar phenomenon, those people tend to earn more because they look better and they appeal more to the public. So because of that, they would get more views, they would reach more people across the world. People would be more willing to pay to attend their shows because they look physically attractive, as opposed to somebody who doesn't look that great physically. So, to prove the superstar syndrome, who do you think would earn more between the best doctor in the world versus the best actor in the world? It's obvious, the best actor or the best musician would probably earn more than the best doctor who is busting his time to save lives. The last thing that leads to earning differentials is what we call signaling theory. So what that means is certain things could signal to people and make them to want to pay you more than someone else. And that includes things like having a certificate. So for instance, apart from graduating from college, having a good quality education, when you get extra certificates, for instance, certificates in data analysis, certificates in management, all of these extra certificates send a positive, strong signal to your employers or potential employers that you are more qualified and more capable than someone who doesn't have those certificates, right? Or even the kind of university that you graduate from. So someone that graduates from an Ivy League school like Harvard and the likes would probably be perceived more favorably than someone who graduated from a lower ranking university. Now, that doesn't mean that the person from Harvard is smarter or more capable, but the fact that the person from Harvard is from a highly ranked school would send a stronger positive signal, even though in reality, the person from the less ranked school might be more capable of doing the job. So let's consider this scenario. Imagine spending 4 years at the world's best university, but the attendance is secret. No one can know that you ever went to that school, right? So what use is that when you cannot show it on a resume that you went to the best school, compared to someone who can get a degree from the best school but cannot study there? So let's say they're just willing to give you a degree even though you don't have to study there, right? Which one do you think would be more attractive to potential employers? It's obviously having the degree from the best school even though you actually did not go there. This is why sometimes you see people forging documents and certificates in their resume that they went to a high quality school that they actually did not go to, right? Because that would send a positive higher signal than somebody who went to that best school but doesn't put it on their resume to show that out to the world. So signaling theory of education really plays a huge role in differential earnings. Remember monopsony? Monopsony refers to having one buyer, as we discussed in the previous chapters. And in this case, for the labor market, a buyer means who demands for labor, right? So a labor demander, which is the firms or the businesses who demand for labor. So they are literally buying our labor and paying us wages in return, okay? We could have less than equilibrium wages, just refers to low wages, like for instance, minimum wage, which is a very low wage, right? And those kind of things exist in a monopsony. So because you only have one company that is employing workers, they can afford to charge wages as low as possible because they don't have a competition. If you don't work for the company, you're not going to work for any other company. So they can afford to really cut down on wages and have as much workers as possible to maximize their outputs. So in that case, you would have less than equilibrium wages. And a good example could be maybe the government or even like a very big construction firm or a very big factory that can afford to have as many workers as possible. So assuming that they're the only buyer or the only business or firm in a small community, for instance. Something else that works for monopsonies is to have contracts binding the workers to work for them for a certain period of time. So let's say 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever the contract duration is. And that helps them to secure their workers so they don't have to bother about competition from other companies, right? So that is how monopsony works, when a company has the sole advantage to employ as many workers as possible and cut down on the wages because of less competition or no competition from other firms. However, on the other hand, we could have higher than equilibrium wages. So what that means is the wages are high enough to encourage productivity. So usually companies do this to retain their best workers. If they don't want to lose their most efficient worker, then they would offer a higher wage to keep the employee from resigning and going to another competitive firm to work, right? So higher than equilibrium wages, which is also known as efficiency wages, encourages workers to be very efficient on the job, right? Because they're getting paid so much. And this is also possible by labor unions who are able to bargain for a higher wage for their workers. That encourages productivity and that leads to an increase in labor supply, right? So we, the household, are willing to supply our labor at a higher wage. So there's surplus labor supply, as opposed to the firms, because the firms and the companies are paying a higher wage, then they reduce their demand for labor. So the companies would rather let go of unskilled workers, let's say younger workers who do not have so much years of experience, just to keep their most skilled and productive workers, right? So because of that, you have reduction in your labor demand, or the workers that are employed by the firm, and increase in your labor supply. So eventually that leads to increased unemployment because the firms are now going to lay off so many unskilled workers just to keep the few skilled workers. Okay, and continuing on chapter 20, we've learned about the various reasons for earning differentials, and now let's move on to discrimination. So earning differentials is more related to justifiable reasons for people to earn differently, either based on your skills, your education level, or even the nature of the job, right? But discrimination is not really based on justifiable reasons, but is more based on personal preferences as opposed to a factual reason to justify the difference in earnings. So this could be in form of a racial discrimination, which we all know about. So people with skin color tend to be discriminated compared to those who are perceived as whites. So in that case, it's not necessarily based on ability, but just because of someone's skin color, then they earn differently based on that bias as opposed to a justifiable reason. So how about gender? So gender is another form of discrimination where just because of someone's gender, you treat them differently and then you pay them differently for the job, even though they are assumed to have the same capacity for the job. So for instance, we talked about the females and the males, how generally males tend to be more preferred because you don't have to deal with the disruption in the work process due to family and childhood and pregnancy and the likes. But again, remember, all of this depends on the nature of the job. There are some jobs where females are preferred, like the nursing job or the receptionist job, where females are preferred and have less preferences towards the men. How about age? So we talked about age as well, where older people tend to be more preferred as long as they're not too old, but in their 30s or 40s they tend to be more preferred because they have more experiences, more skill sets than the younger person who just finished from school and doesn't have as much hands-on experience. And then there's religion. So religion is another reason that people don't really talk about, but it exists, in the workforce, where you just might want to employ somebody because they share the same religious beliefs as you. So whether it's you being a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew, a Hindu, like whatever your religion is, there's that personal preference or inclination where employers might want to hire people that align with their religious beliefs just because they feel like there's more reasons to bond and it might be easier to work with them. And now, discrimination based on physical or social attributes is very different from statistical discrimination. So statistical discrimination is more based on somewhat irrelevant characteristics that you observe. For instance, if you see someone who shows up for a job interview with like green colored hair or like purple colored hair, then our human physical tendency would most likely be like, is this person really qualified? As opposed to just keeping an open mind and getting to see how qualified the person really is, right? Also, even like dressing style. So you see someone show up for a job interview with like slippers, bathroom slippers, or like flip-flops and, baggy jeans and just like not properly dressed, then the human tendency would be to just discriminate against them and just rate them as unfit for the job. So discrimination could also relate to human capital or signaling theory, as in it may indicate their ability for the job, but not all the time. So most of the time, it doesn't really indicate how capable they are for the job. Another way of discrimination might even be the quality of schools, again, discriminating against like high quality schools versus low quality schools, or even signaling theory where you're like, oh yeah, this person went to a private school and so the person should be more qualified than someone who went to a public school, but that isn't always the case. Discrimination could also be as a result of the preferences of the target audience. So for instance, if the people who are buying your products prefer having workers of a certain type. So for instance, in a restaurant, let's say it's a white neighborhood and the restaurant prefers to have white workers, white waitresses and all of that compared to blacks, then the restaurant owner might not have a choice but to just hire white workers, right? So again, this applies for different fields based on the target audience. So even skincare, it took a while for skincare to pay attention to the black audience, and including black models and black makeup skincare products was a result of the target audience now including colored people. And this is done to maximize profits. There are proven studies that exist on how people have created fake resumes with every single qualification is the same. The only thing that differs is the name. And the name, for instance, would suggest different races, right? So it has been proven that the colored people with foreign names, maybe Indian origin or Asian origin, or even the black people, tend to receive less phone calls for an interview and to be considered for the job compared to the white people. Ceteris paribus. Another thing is government policies could encourage or discourage discrimination. So, for instance, when you have segregation of neighborhoods, black neighborhoods versus white neighborhoods, where more attention is paid to the white neighborhoods and maintaining those neighborhoods as opposed to the black neighborhoods, that is how government policies could influence discrimination as well. So that is that for chapter 20. We've learned about the various reasons for differential earnings as well as discrimination. Don't forget to subscribe to this video so you get timely updates, and to like this video and share to other economic students that find this useful. See you in the next chapter.